Okay, so we've been talking about where to put our fingers and how to place them. Now let's talk about how to read a chord diagram. A chord diagram it'll basically be a grid with a few symbols on it, circles with numbers inside the circles, and above it we will see either X's or O's, and I'm going to explain to you what each of these mean. The first thing we need to think about is, what do the lines mean? So if we're holding a chord diagram in front of us, we're looking down, the vertical lines going from left to right represent each one of our guitar strings. The farthest to the left is going to represent our thickest and lowest sounding string, the E string. As we go to the right, each of those lines will represent the next string up. So we'll have 6 lines going up and down. Each one represents one of the strings. The next thing you'll notice is we have lines going horizontally. Those represent the fret wires. Each of these right here. Between those two, we'll get what essentially looks like a grid, and we'll have boxes in between. Those boxes represent the frets. Now each of these frets, this is where we're actually going to place our finger, inside the frets. So if we continue to look at this diagram, we'll notice there will usually be a circle on one of the vertical lines that represents the strings, and inside that circle will be a number. Now, the placement of the circle is what tells us where do we put our finger. So for example, let's say we're looking at this chord diagram. On the second line, going up and down, we notice there's a circle in the 3rd box. So we know that we have to go to the 5th string and put a finger down on the 3rd fret. The number inside of that circle is what tells us what finger to use. So let's just assume, for the purpose of this discussion, that there's a 3 inside of that circle. We would go to the 3rd fret and put our 3rd finger down. Now, above the chord diagram, you may see X's or O's. If you see an X above the vertical line, that tells you you don't want to strum that string. If you see an O or a 0, that tells you the string is open. We don't fret anything, but we do strum it. So for example, let's take a C chord. So if we're looking at a chord diagram of a C chord, we're going to have, once again, our vertical lines. The first thing we'll see is there's going to be a circle with the number 3 in it on the 2nd line, which tells us, and it'll be in the 3rd box. So it tells us 3rd fret, 5th string, 3rd finger. The next thing we'll notice is on the 3rd line, which will be our 4th string, there will be a circle on the 2nd box with a 2 in it. That tells us 2nd finger, 2nd fret, 4th string. When we get to the next string up, the 3rd string, we'll see that there is a circle above the top, or an O, and that tells us that's going to be an open string, but we're still going to strum it. We'll get to the next line, which will be our 2nd string. There will be a circle in the 1st box with a number 1. That tells us 1st finger, 1st fret, 2nd string. And finally, there will be an O above the last line, or the top string, the high E, the 1. That means we'll just leave it open, but we'll strum it anyway. And then we can look back and see that above the 6th string, the fattest string, will be an X. And that tells us we don't strum that. So we can look at that chord diagram. It tells us exactly where our fingers go, what fingers to use, where to put them, and which strings to strum and which ones not to strum. So after reading that chord diagram, we know where each of these fingers go, and we know we don't strum the lowest string. So we'll go ahead and strum the C chord. And that's how you read a chord diagram.